first thing that we're looking at here is who gets the reps at left tackle to start. I think that's going to be an interesting battle to see how much time goes on before or if we see Broderick Jones kind of take over with the ones. I wanted to ask you if there's anything like really intriguing to you, though, like storyline wise, other than that, as we go through OTAs. I'll let you go first so I don't steal them. I have a couple things in mind. I think we might cross over on some of our thoughts here, but is there anything with OTAs opening up that you're kind of looking for? It's football in shorts, so like you're not going to learn a whole lot.
But... Yeah. No, I do think left tackle is probably the most intriguing thing entering OTAs with Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones. I think that running back outside of the top two is an interesting position looking at the Steelers going forward. You don't really have a clear-cut RB3 after Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, so I think that's another interesting position. And I think that looking at what happens with how they approach the cornerback position of what we've been talking about, like how they deploy guys, whether they're playing in the nickel or who's playing in the nickel, I guess I should say, and who's getting deployed on the outside, what do those like reps look like. That's something that's interesting to me because you and I have really just kind of made a rough draft of what we think the defense could look like on the outside in nickel package, but we really don't know until we actually see them play football. And I think you're going to get a glimpse of the idea of what the Steelers are going to like to play with the defense, like schematically in their secondary. And so that's another position that I'm looking at, just like who's getting reps at nickel, and then like basically like how much is Joey Porter Jr. starting on the outside versus like other players. And also like Corey Trice, is he playing yet? Is he healthy enough to participate?
That's a good question. I don't know the extent of what he's doing. I've seen pictures of him on the field and stuff. So he's in some capacity.
I would just be interested if he's healthy, like what's he look like post injury and playing there as well. But that's just off the top of my head, the major ones that I think. The one that we really haven't talked about a lot on the show that I just like thought of was running back, because after Najee and Jaylen Warren, I just don't think there's a clear-cut RB3. I mean, Anthony McFarland could be it, but he hasn't really shown enough in the past couple seasons with the Steelers, and I think there's an argument to be made that the Steelers can move on from him pretty easily.
Yeah, I do think he's probably the leader in the clubhouse when you look at it right now, because it's like, how could he not be? It's just kind of by default. I think that's why it's so interesting with a Master Teague being cut to when he was, because a lot of people were wondering if he would possibly like take that leap and end up being the RB3. I think if it's not McFarland, it's probably somebody not currently on the roster. Like, I don't see another guy right now on this team that I could see making the 53. I'm rooting for, and I forgot his last name already. Alfonso something, the HBCU kid they signed from the rookie camp that they actually gave a contract to. If I could find it here now, should have been prepared for this. Alfonso Graham, the running back.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see, because he's got a lot of juice. I'm curious to see if he can kind of make a mark here. But OTAs, like I said, it's football in shorts. It's hard to learn a lot of things. But you go back to last year, like OTAs is when we started getting, like when we learned about George Pickens. He was doing some crazy things, and that's when the hype train started right then and there. So, who's going to be that guy this year? It could be, on the defensive side, Joey Porter Jr. It was interesting. I saw Nick Farabaugh tweeted out a video of Darnell Washington, and pretty clumpy route that he ran. He's not winning because of his route running. That's not what makes him the player that he is.
Look at his route running at Georgia. It wasn't, he's not a route runner. He is a big dude. That's how he wins at the catch point. He's just
Could you imagine if he could run routes like Calvin Austin?
He was that size, but he ran like Deontay.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious. But that's just, so that video surfaced and that was obviously a talking point and stuff. But he's obviously going to be somebody that's very interesting to watch as the process goes on here, because I'm just curious as we get into game action and stuff, how many snaps a guy like that is going to play. I think Connor Hayward's an interesting one to watch, because it doesn't seem like he's really involved with the tight ends anymore.
Yeah.
I
wasn't in the picture. And as we all know, social media tells everything.
Absolutely. And they've used that picture a ton. But he also hasn't been in the meetings with them, people have said as well. So
I'm also curious for RB3. So I was just curious to look back, because I didn't really remember him playing special teams at all. But Anthony McFarland, not a special teams guy. In 3 years in Pittsburgh, he has 8 career snaps on special teams.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, okay, but so Steven Sims signed elsewhere. if he ends up being like the returner, then sure, he could make the roster that way, like being the return man in RB3. But if you're viewing that spot as like, Anthony Miller's, or, going back to Gunner, or I know there's that undrafted kid Bird that could potentially win that job. I mean, kickoffs, especially with, Larry Bird, especially with, the new role, they're trying to make them as obsolete as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they're going to even covet giving somebody a role just for that. But yeah, special teams is going to be how somebody makes that RB3 spot. And to your point, Anthony McFarland hasn't done a whole lot. He hasn't been available to do it a whole lot. So
yeah, he only has 8 snaps on special teams. 0 came in 2020, which he only had. Well, actually, 2020 was his most. He had his most snaps in his career. But he had 8 snaps in 2021, 0 snaps on special teams last year.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, I remember I was talking with Derek about this too. It's like he was cooking guys as a route runner in camp last year, but if he can't stay on the field, now as an RB3, like, I don't know how much he's going to be playing in game anyway, but we know how Tomlin is, man. Like, if you're not available, I'm surprised they haven't given up on him already, to be quite honest with you. It's that, I guess that just goes to speak, to his talent, the fact that he's still hanging around, given that he hasn't been available to them much.
He went to Maryland. So, Tomlin's not going to cut him that easily.
True. That buys you one season at least.
It does. Also, massive L for the Steelers with in the all-name team with cutting Master Teague.
Yeah, that's true too.
Shout out to
just
Sarge,
a weird time.
All-name team.
It was a very weird time for them to make those cuts. They cut 3 players and signed one, and now obviously, why am I blanking on who they just signed? Marcus Golden coming in. That's another roster spot there.
First I thought you meant running back, and I'm like, I don't know.
No.
Who did they?
No. So they're up to 88 guys, I think, right now, of the allotted 90 that you can be at for the time being. Then obviously it has to go down to 53, and it's not in waves anymore either. So
when is that deadline?
You're asking the wrong guy.
Let's see. When? Why the heck can I not? Why is my computer acting up? 53.
Oh wait, that's from 2021, so that won't help.
This is great content. August 29th.
There we go. There it is. August 29th.
Okay. So it's later. I didn't know if it was like earlier in camp.
Oh no, because you gotta go through the preseason. Like, they're not gonna have guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
dude, imagine evaluating 40 players that you're going to cut.
It's tough. It's tough business. It's cutthroat business. I do want to touch on, since you're the one that brought him up. If you didn't, I was going to. Obviously, we've already talked about the RB3, the slot corner. I keep bringing it up. I feel like I'm, beating a dead horse at this point. I just don't see it. Whatever their vision is, I'm having a hard time seeing it, because Chandon Sullivan talked about it after day one that he was getting the majority of the snaps there. I have a hard time feeling like he can be a serviceable player for them there, based off his body of work.
He stinks. Watch the Minnesota Vikings last year. He stinks.
Yeah, it's like, I can understand, people saying like, oh, well, maybe a change of scenery or something like that. It's not like Minnesota was the only place he's played and was bad. Like, he's had some other stops. I just have a hard time believing that all of a sudden, like, Pittsburgh's going to be the perfect fit for him. And okay, like, say it is, and they do strike gold on this, and he's a fine player for them. 1, incredibly lucky that was the case. And 2, if he's not, like, what's the backup plan? Like I just, there's no contingency here if Chandon Sullivan is good,
Norwood,
at least the way I'm looking at it. Yeah, I mean, Trey Norwood's played some slot.
They might as well.
Yeah, Peterson's played like 20 snaps over the last 2 years there. Are they? Honestly, I brought up the idea to Derek. Why do we talk about Derek so much? Of Corey Trice, not because he doesn't like profile like a typical corner, but specifically to cover tight ends. Like, you look at the way that Cincinnati was using Flowers last year, because he's a massive corner, about the same size as Trice. And specifically, he was a tight end matchup. Could the Steelers potentially use Trice in that way? Like, this is your role. You're going to be covering tight ends when they line up in the slot.
Him, Joey Porter Jr., Patrick Peterson, all in the field at once. That's long. Those are that's a long secondary.
Just put Luke Barku out there somewhere.
Yeah. Let's just throw him
James
out
Pierre
there.
is
Rover.
Pretty big too, comparatively. Isn't Levi Wallace might be 6'1", even. Who's their smallest corner?
Let's see.
Probably. I mean, it's Chandon Sullivan. Dot has to be, but
I don't know. But I like the idea. Just from looking at, you have no other options, so you might as well get experimental with it. Like after Chandon Sullivan, you don't have any viable options. Like you don't have a clear cut. Like we don't have Cam Sutton anymore. We don't have Mike Hilton anymore. Anybody who is clear cut, that is our slot guy. We don't have that. So they're going to have to experiment in order to be able to fill that role. And so I think it would be smart to test that out, and having a big slot corner that could be really good with matchups. So let's look at the corners and how tall they are. So we got Corey Trice, who is 6'3", my guy. Chris Wilcox is 6'2". Okay. I'm just looking at the entire roster.
All right.
He's 6'2". Levi Wallace is 6 foot. Chandon Sullivan is 5'11". That's basically Smitty's height. Yep. Joey Porter Jr. 6'2", James Pierre 6'2", Patrick Peterson 6'1", and then Luke Barku 6'1", Madre Harper. I don't know why I'm saying his name, but he's on the roster 6'1".
Yeah,
they've only got
crazy.
One guy that's under 6 foot.
That's wild,
and it's their worst one.
Definitely their worst one that has a chance to start.
Yeah.
It's really hard to envision a world where he should be just handed this job seemingly as the starting slot corner, but that's the world we're living in right now. Unless, we see they brought in Golden this week. I don't think that they are done, just because of the point in the season where we're at, still feel like, okay, especially because of the way it's going to happen this year, going from 90 to 53 immediately, I feel like that could be a great spot to find a nickel right then from somebody else's roster. So between that and off-ball linebacker, I think they still got to be on the lookout to add to this defense.
I think so too. I mean, there's some clear-cut needs. Even if day one we have our starters on the team right now, I'm not comfortable with it at certain positions, and so it would make sense for them to add.